Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking on something huge. Well, actually, we're taking on nothing, literally. It's something you probably haven't thought a whole lot about since grade school math, but for centuries, scientists and philosophers have hit a massive, impenetrable wall when trying to understand the literal concept of nothing. But there's a groundbreaking 2026 research paper by Mesut Tez called The Monad O, Solving the Problem of Zero, and it attempts to completely dismantle this wall. Tez offers this absolutely fascinating process philosophical synthesis that might just rewrite how we view the foundational building blocks of the universe.
But to understand the solution, we kind of have to understand the culprit first. I mean, we see zero every single day, right? It's just a mundane little digit on our keyboards or hanging out in our bank accounts. But conceptually, zero is a highly dangerous idea. When it's treated as an absolute absence, like literal nothingness, zero fundamentally breaks the laws of physics and philosophy.
I want you to really think about this for a second. What happens when you divide by nothing? If you type it into a calculator, you get an error. If you ask Siri, she insults your lack of friends. But when the simple arithmetic limitation is applied to the actual physical universe, it creates absolute chaos. The math tells us the result is undefined or infinite, and that means our understanding of reality suddenly just snaps. Part 1. The problem with nothing. Okay, let's dive into this. To really grasp why Tez's paper is such a game changer, we need to map out exactly how much trouble the classical concept of nothing causes for modern science. Tez lays out this roadmap of 4 distinct paradoxes, or aporia, created by zero. First up, the creation problem. How in the world can something come from absolutely nothing? Second, the singularity problem, division by zero creating these impossible infinities. Third, the void problem, the realization that the vacuum of space actually isn't empty at all. And fourth, the negation problem, this flawed idea that canceling something out means it just ceases to exist. Zero, acting as absolute absence, causes massive, literal headaches across cosmology, math, and logic. And I want to be absolutely clear here. We aren't just talking about minor rounding errors on a chalkboard. These are moments where our understanding of reality hits a brick wall. When we study the center of a black hole or the microscopic distances in quantum field theory, our equations force us to divide by zero. And the result? A singularity, an infinity. Our physical models completely break down, all because we're treating zero as a literal void. Part 2. The roots of process. You know, great minds have wrestled with these exact breakdowns for centuries, trying to patch up the math. But Tez argues that to truly rescue our physical models, we actually need to look to philosophy for the rescue. Which brings us to this incredible historical duel. On one side, you've got Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, who argued reality is made of static, eternal, indivisible substances he called monads. And on the other side, you have the 20th century thinker Alfred North Whitehead, who championed process philosophy. Whitehead argued that reality isn't made of static things at all. It's all about dynamic, constant change and becoming. Think about Whitehead's universe for a second. An object is never just an isolated substance sitting alone in a void. It is fundamentally a dynamic web of relationships. Now, Whitehead was onto something huge with this logic of relations, but as Tez points out, his early work lacked a crucial mechanism. He didn't really have a mathematical or logical way to explain how new events are actually created out of that web. Part 3. Enter the monad. And this brings us to the core of Mesut Tez's paper. This is where we get the paradigm-shifting solution that bridges Leibniz's solid units and Whitehead's dynamic processes. Enter the new monad, represented by a lowercase o. Tez redefines the monad not as a static block, but as minimal presence. It's a foundational unit that transforms rather than nullifies. This is the crucial shift, guys. Tez argues we absolutely must stop thinking of zero as absolute absence and start seeing it as minimal presence. It is not a void. It's the baseline of existence. Now check out this vital distinction modeled here between math and reality. In standard mathematical appearance, adding zero does, well, nothing, right? X plus 0 equals X. But in ontological reality, meaning the actual physical reality of existence, interacting with the monad fundamentally transforms the entity. Tez writes this as X plus the monad equals X prime. The entity might look mathematically the same on the surface, but it has experienced an encounter. It has a history now. It has changed. Let's move to how this builds into something concrete.
This isn't just abstract theory, it's a step-by-step description of creative transformation. Step 1. An entity meets the monad, that baseline of minimal presence. Step 2. Through that exact encounter, the entity is historically enriched. It holds the trace of that meeting forever. Step 3. Genuine novelty emerges from the process. It doesn't magically pop out of nowhere. It comes from transformation.
Tez lays out some specific axioms for how this works: transformative encounter, creative synthesis, intensification, historical preservation, and temporal asymmetry. Now, you don't need to memorize all the vocabulary. Together, these axioms prove one beautiful concept: nothing is ever lost in our universe. The past is structurally preserved, the future is pure potential, and everything is continually synthesizing and transforming through its relationship with the monad. Part 4. Rewriting the rules.
So the crucial point is, what happens when we take this new philosophical tool, this monad of minimal presence, and apply it back to those massive universe-breaking paradoxes we talked about at the start? Well, first, we solve the creation problem. The age-old paradox of creation ex nihilo, something coming from absolute nothing, it just completely dissolves. If zero is actually minimal presence, then the Big Bang wasn't a magical transition from a void into matter. It was simply a shift in presence, from a highly contracted potential state to the expanded cosmos we see today. There was literally never nothing.
Next, we eliminate the singularity problem. Remember those black holes forcing us to divide by zero and crashing our math with infinite density? Well, if we redefine that zero as the monad, as minimal presence, the operation entirely changes. Division by minimal presence preserves the identity of the entity. That means our physical models don't have to break down into impossible infinities anymore. We entirely avoid that conceptual collapse.
Third, the void problem is solved, and honestly, this perfectly aligns with modern quantum physics. Science has already shown us that empty space isn't actually empty. It's seething with fluctuating quantum energy. Tez's monad makes philosophical sense of this. The vacuum is actually a plenum, a space that is completely full rather than completely empty. It's just existence in its most transparent, non-resistant mode. And finally, we reinterpret negation. Adding x to negative x doesn't just annihilate reality into an empty zero, no. It creates a balanced, neutral complementarity. Think about particle-antiparticle annihilation in physics. When they collide, they don't just vanish into absolute nothingness. They create a massive burst of energy. Negation isn't a deletion. It's just a phase of a much larger ongoing synthesis. Which brings us right back to Whitehead, who famously said, "The many become one and are increased by one." Tez's introduction of the monad perfectly captures this incredibly poetic vision. The universe isn't some collection of dead objects separated by empty voids. It's a constantly synthesizing, ever-growing process where every single encounter adds to the rich tapestry of reality. Now, if you're sitting there wondering, okay, but what are the practical implications of this? Tez makes it super clear this isn't just some abstract mind bender. This fundamental shift applies everywhere. It changes how we interpret infinities in quantum field theory. It redefines the origin of the cosmos. It even impacts information theory. I mean, think about a basic computer bit. A zero isn't no information. It's a specific, positive state of voltage. So the main takeaway for us today is that Tez gives us a framework where the monad is both a mathematical tool and a metaphysical reality. It preserves the continuity of the universe while constantly producing novelty. We don't have to throw away our math books or our equations. We just have to radically reinterpret what zero actually represents when we apply it to the real world. Zero isn't a dead end, folks. It's the beginning. Which leaves us with this final lingering thought. If reality isn't made of static things separated by nothing, but is instead a continuous, unbroken process of transformation built entirely on minimal presence, what exactly is a unit of becoming? How do we measure the very act of existence itself? I'll let you ponder that one.